Hey everyone, Matt here from Docs Are Running, and today we're going to do a comparison review, or should I upgrade episode, of the New Balance Fresh Foam X 880 version 14 versus the new version 15. Now the 880 version 14 was a really interesting shoe that in a lot of companies, everybody's going taller and taller. This shoe actually stayed in that more moderate stack height and actually got really light. It was a really comfortable shoe. It's definitely not exciting. It's not a bouncy midsole. It was just your standard neutral shoe that was actually lighter, and it was a really refreshing take. As expected with the running industry, version 15 evolves more into a maximal shoe. It gets above the 40mm stack height. Really, it's being billed as a firmer alternative to the 1080, and we will do a comparison review here. But these are very different shoes. So the purpose of this review is if you like the 880 or if you're interested in either one of these, to help you figure out which one might work better for you. As always, we're going to start off with specs first. We're going to do my men's size 10, which I took my individual measurements. In the 880 version 14, my size 10 came in at 9.3 ounces or about 262 grams. In the 880 version 15, this thing comes in at 300 grams or 10.6 ounces, so a large increase in weight. And the reason for that is there's also a massive increase in stack height. Over in the version 14, stack height is 31 millimeters in the heel, 23 in the forefoot for an 8mm drop. So really moderate stack height, not super high. Everything changes over in version 15. It is 40.5 in the heel, 30.5 in the forefoot for a 6mm drop. So much higher stack height and slightly lower drop. And I will say that drop feels much lower because with more foam, compresses more. It's a little bit softer than the 880 version 14. It's still a slightly firm shoe, but that lower heel drop and the more maximal rocker feel is really prominent. That's really the biggest difference between these two shoes. Fits are really similar, and I'll talk about that in a second, but the rides are really different. The 880 version 14 felt light, it felt firm, it felt really a standard training shoe, nothing sexy about it, just great for getting miles, or especially if you're a newer runner or walker, just wanting a simple shoe that was light, that's where this shoe came in. Version 15 becomes the maximal rocker shoe. It is much stiffer, which is a natural result of having a higher stack height and much more foam underfoot, and it's also, again, less flexible, and a lot of the shoe and the geometry have changed. So I really like the 880 version 14 because it had this really nice posterior lateral heel bevel. It transitions really, really nicely. In version 15, you can't, as you get super tall stack heights, it's really hard to put a bevel in one direction because sometimes the farther up you are, the more it drives you in that direction. For some people, that can be too far. So the bevel's more centered in the 15. That makes the heel a little bit clunky initially. It took about 30 miles for this to break in and to have this lateral piece softened a little bit. But there's a more centered ride at the heel in the 15 compared to a posterior lateral bevel in the 14. So if you like that lateral transition, 14 is going to be better. If you want a more centered ride, version 15 is going to be better. As you transition to the midfoot is filled in quite a bit more in version 15 versus 14. I like the heel in terms of stability in both of them. They both have sidewalls. They're not too aggressive. So it makes the heel very stable neutral. As you move to the midfoot, the 14 was neutral. 15, very stable neutral. Midfoot is filled in, and when you have a wider shape and fill something in, it adds stiffness, which makes it more inherently stable at the midfoot, more into that stable neutral realm, but it makes things a little bit more stiff in terms of the transition, and stiffness can definitely influence firmness of a shoe, which is why walking, this shoe feels softer than the 14, but running, both of them actually feel very similar in terms of the slightly firm midsole, and that's because the stiffness and longitudinal bending stiffness of a shoe can influence how firm it feels or soft. And so version 15 does feel very similar in terms of firmness. It's clear there's more cushioning underfoot, but the wider midfoot adds to that stiffness and firmness, which makes it a little bit more stable, but again, firmer ride that feels similar to version 14, just like I said, a much taller stack height. The forefoot is also where things get really, really different. The forefoot is much stiffer in version 15, feels much more rockered. Version 14 feels just a little bit more flexible, a little bit more natural, a little lower. So if you like this, that's where this shoe is going to come in for 14. But if you want that overall rockered ride, 15 is going to do a lot better for you, and some people just do better in this. Other people do better in this stuff. Weight is really, really apparent, by the way, so this is not a fast shoe that you're gonna be able to do anything in. Version 14 is gonna be that shoe that it's not really gonna do anything fast either because the foam isn't that responsive, but because it's a little lighter, you might be able to handle that. Really, these are both daily trainers. This is just a more maximal daily trainer. This is gonna be more of your classic daily trainer. So if you wanted more stack height, you wanted more cushioning, this is gonna be better. If you really still wanted that lighter ride, that more traditional ride, that's where you're gonna wanna go with version 14, and there's nothing wrong with either one of them. It's really just gonna depend on what you want. In terms of fit, both of them are actually really similar. The forefoot is fairly wide, but lower volume. That toe guard's still pretty aggressive, so if you're sensitive to that, go up a half size, but similar fit. Midfoot heel fit fairly normal. I did have to tie the laces down a little bit to get a secure fit, and then it was fine. And the upper disappears, and it's not something you have to worry really about. So maximal shoe, more traditional shoe. If one of those is something you like a little bit better, great, awesome. They're different. This is perfectly fine to get on sale. If you want the more cushioning, get this one. Totally up to you in terms of what works better. If you've tried these, as always, please let me know in the comments below. The whole point of these is to help people figure out what works best for them. And last but not least, hope this really helps because I want to help you figure out what really works best for you as an individual.